Hello, friends. I'm Anderson Marchak,
And I'm Ricardo Segura.
and we are the Panel Bros. Welcome to the panel.
Welcome to the panel.
Well, here we are. It's been interesting up until now,
Yup.
and we've enjoyed having a lot of general discussions. We've only discussed one movie in particular
Hmm.
since we started this up. It was Knives Out, but we've
Yep.
we've been hitting a few topics here and there. We got our favorite actors out of the way, our favorite movies, our favorite directors, and it's about time we start getting into the nitty gritty here. We're going to start doing movie breakdowns and
Yes.
discussions about movies themselves. An episode dedicated to each movie. So we decided to start out with the boss, Zack Snyder, and go through his
Yeah.
filmography.
I was hyped, man, when you were like, "Hey,
Yeah.
we're doing Zack Snyder. We're gonna go through his filmography," and I was like, the first movie we were gonna talk about. I was stoked. I was like, "Oh, I love this movie."
Oh yeah. So we're going to start off with Dawn of the Dead. So
Dawn of the Dead.
it was released on March 19th of
Mhm.
2004. And you're the bigger horror guy than me, so this is a remake of the George Romero movie, is that right?
Absolutely, 1978, George Romero's Dawn of the Dead.
Okay, and then that was the sequel to Night of the Living Dead.
Yep. Yeah, Romero kind of had like these unofficial sequels that just follow with "of the Dead" title. You know what I mean?
Okay,
So, yep, yep.
alrighty then. So for whatever reason, Zach picked, or the studio, they wanted this movie, and Zach got it. And
Hmm.
I, so we just went. We're just going to go right into it here. There's this opening scene here. Um, the lead character. Let's see here, Anna.
It's
She
your girl Anna.
Yeah, Anna, she comes home and everything is fine in the neighborhood, and then, you know, just things just start going south. We see the infected little girl,
Yep.
she jumps up and she's running at them. We find out that the zombies are running,
Let
and
me
you know.
boy, I when I was in the theater and I didn't know what to expect and I saw that they ran, this was the first time I saw a zombie movie where I was like, "You know what? I don't think I'm gonna make it this time." Like, I was like, "They running? Okay. Okay."
Yeah, exactly. And I'll be honest with you, I was never really a big zombie guy because of that, because it was just like they move slow, and
He
it's hard to get that excitement.
Yeah, it's funny too 'cause we already know I love horror. Zombies, oddly enough, are my favorite subgenre within horror.
Mm,
I
okay.
love zombie movies. I'm a huge fan of Romero. Night of the Living Dead, Day of the Dead, Land of the Dead. Like, I've
Okay.
always been a big zombie fan. And like you said, like, you kind of see these zombies, and I remember even as a kid watching and being like, "Oh, they're really slow. They're not intelligent." You know what I mean? And I was like, "Oh, it's in the horde mentality. Like, if you get caught in a horde, you might be in trouble." But I was like, "I'll be okay." But then Dawn of the Dead happened, the remake with Zack Snyder, and said, "Oh, you think you're comfortable?
Right.
Well, these guys are gonna sprint." And I remember I texted you when I was watching it, and I said, "Hey, man, this movie only takes 5 minutes." And Zach says, "I'm not here to hold your hand. You know what zombie movies are. We're going right for the jugular, pun intended, because that's the first kill of the movie." And they
Right.
just went right for it. 5 minutes in, we're going.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, so I did think about another movie, and they weren't quite zombies per se, but it was like a similar thing. And I'm thinking about 28 Days Later from Danny Boyle,
Yes.
and it came out two
Yes.
years before. Your boy Killian Murphy in the lead, and
Mhm.
it was 2002. So that was the first time we kind of got a taste. I mean, they were infected, so to speak, but they didn't really call them zombies. It was like an
This is
infection.
this is where I get technical because I'm a zombie
Right.
guy. So like I always insinuated, I said, well, in 28 days later, I'm like, they're not zombies. They're infected by what's known as the rage virus.
There we
So their
go.
intention isn't necessarily to feed on human flesh, it's to destroy, mangle, and maim in any way possible, which is why
Right.
in 28 days later, you'll see bites, you'll see punches, you'll see claws. Like they're just infected with an abnormal amount of rage. So it's
Right.
referred to as a rage virus. So I that was always my way out, where I'm
Yeah.
like, well,
Good.
they're not technically zombies, This is a rage
Right.
virus. It's rage, where zombies, as you and I
Right.
know, are the
And
living dead walking among us.
exactly. And I'm curious if Zach was inspired by 28 Days Later or if he had the idea. You know, I don't remember ever hearing him talk about that. But
Yeah, I've never heard him break it down.
right, you know, because once again, they didn't do zombies in that movie. It was something else. So,
Mhm.
but you know, the virus spreads fast. You know, the little girl bites Anna's significant other, and then within minutes, he's ready to go.
Yup. Full on again, it immediately bites this guy in the jugular. And as
Right.
soon as she does it, she's trying her best. She's a nurse, so she's trying her best to stop the blood and everything. And
Right.
and by the time she figures out that she can't even get through to 911, this dude is already standing on his feet, ready to
Oh,
just rip into her. And
nuts.
it's again, it's adrenaline, it's constant, it's immediate. And I love that about Zach, where he was just like, no, we're going in and we're going right now.
Right. Exactly. And she gets away from him and she goes outside and then literally the neighborhood is on fire.
A literal fire. It is a war zone outside. You've got neighbors with guns, and they're like, "Get inside the house, Anna. Get
Right, stay
inside the
back.
house." And you're seeing people get tore up left and right, and you're just like, "Oh my god!"
What
Like
is happening?
that fast.
You know? And I remember this one shot, her SO, he's in the back and
Mhm.
she gets in the car and he's chasing her, but you see
Yep.
him, he sees a live body. So he goes for that body, that person
Yep.
actually, as she's driving on. She's seeing all this mess in the back in the rear view mirror. She's seeing everything in front of you. Like I think this might be an ongoing theme with Zack Snyder. He goes from 0 to a 10 in
V-
minutes for his
yes.
openings.
Yes. It's so funny because I think I texted you and said, "Hey man, like I very familiar shot from the opening of Dawn of the Dead and Man of Steel, where you have just these main characters kind of observing all the chaos that's happening and ensuing. And it's crazy to think that like in the middle of the night while they were sleeping, all hell broke loose.
Right.
And like you said, she's looking in the review mirror and just observing everything that's happening until she has a moment to kind of try to collect herself and just kind of like figure out like what the heck is going on.
Right. So we get to the mall, and that's where a bulk of the movie will take place,
Yes.
at the mall. So any takeaways as far as when we start getting to introduce ourselves to all the characters and such when we get to the mall?
Yes.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things about it is immediately we're thrown into different social classes, right? So like the first character that Anna actually has somewhat of a conversation with is Kenneth, who's played by Ving Rhames, the police
Right.
officer. And immediately, so you have a nurse and you have a police officer. So you have these two professions that are, they're meant to help people, right? Like that's their professions, to help people.
Right.
And he's like, say something. And she's like, please. And he's like, all right, come with me. And they immediately run into just average Joes, and one of those average Joes is insinuated in the movie as being somewhat of a criminal. They bring it up a couple times, like, how do you feel about following a person that sells TVs as good as I do about one who steals one? They insinuate it. So you have an officer working with someone who would be considered almost a low life by social standards and whatnot, and they kind of have to disregard all of that, everything prior to this moment, just disregard professions, disregard social
Right.
standards. It's like, no, no, our main focus right now is to survive. So I like that that's the group that they kind of put together right away, and they're like off to the mall, and I'm like, all right, let's go.
Right. And you're talking about Mekhi Phifer's role, Andre,
Yes,
who
yes,
ends up being a really crucial part of this movie as we go along here. Um, so we go into like another theme of Zach's movies. He does a lot of faith-based themes
yes.
and you know, religious themes, and not just Christianity, but all types of religion. But for this one,
Mhm.
it's a pastor. He gets on TV, and apparently, you know, everyone's saying this is the end of the world at this point.
Yes. Yes.
And
One of my favorite things about that is that it's a cameo from one of the actors from the original Dawn of Dead.
okay,
It's Ken Foray, who played Peter in the original 1978, and he's back as the pastor.
there we
So
go.
that was just something really cool to see from Zach, where he was like, listen, I'm remaking it, but and there's a couple cameos in here. He said, let's
There
go ahead and
is.
let's get that guy. And I love that touch on religion, and Zach does that quite often. And there's it's I it's one of my favorite lines in the movie. and
Right.
we had discussed, talking about that sort of thing in that moment in that scene. I watched the unrated cut, and one of my favorite things is how they tie religion in. You have this pastor on television, kind of saying, um, you're wondering why this is happening. He goes,
Mhm.
but you have sex out of wedlock. You have man on man relations. You have yeah, you kill babies, and they're using the strong religious tone
Right.
to kind of say that we're at fault for this. And he says the one line, and it's my favorite line in the whole movie because I think when I first saw it, it like terrified me. And he says, "When hell is full, the dead will walk the earth." And that just horrified me
Right.
as a kid, that the idea that this pastor was still, even in the mass chaos, was instilling fear through religion, and we're just like, when hell is full, the dead will walk the earth, and it's
Yeah,
so good.
and, I'd be remiss not to specify this is just one sect of Christianity, and we're not saying all of Christianity
Oh
is
yeah,
like
yeah,
this.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's just
No, no.
this the particular
In
sect
the
of Christian
movie,
right, in the movie. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yes, in the
absolutely.
movie.
So,
Yeah.
don't wanna start we're just starting out. We don't wanna get any hate mail,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we're just quoting the
It's like,
movie,
no, the movie. We're just quoting the movie.
Just quoting the movie. We're not saying, that that's what that faith is about. So that was an interesting part, and then not even a few minutes later, we had that conversation between Kenneth and Andre, and,
Yes.
he said, "Oh, I get it." Well, they're in the bathroom and he's asking him, "You do that church thing?" It's just like, "Well, yeah, I
Yeah.
do it." "What do you," and they're like having this conversation, and then Kenneth just looks at Andre. It's just like, "I get it. You saw hell yesterday, and now you're scared of going to hell for all the bad things you've done." You know? I'll tell you what, you go in the stall, say 5 Hail Marys, wipe your behind, and you and God can call it even.
Yes. Such a good line. It's such a
Yeah,
good line. It's so good because again, you have religion coming back into play. And
right,
I love how Mackay Pfeiffer as Andre even asks, he goes, "You think that I think I deserve to be here for my actions in life?" And Kenneth very honestly, he's like, "Yeah, yeah, I
there we
think you
go.
feel guilty. Yeah, I think you do. I think you feel partially responsible for that." He's like, "No, I don't." And then they bring up he thinks he's here for another reason, and that's to bring his kid into the world. You know what I mean?
Exactly, exactly. So, um, we're gonna move things along a little bit later, and it's just touched on, which ends up being a bigger plot point later on that, all Andre wants is the best for his baby at
Hmm.
this point because his significant other, um, is pregnant, and, that ends up being a big point, with the movie as we move along here. All right. So I had another point here. Um, so anything else you wanted to touch on before we move forward here?
Um, okay, so obviously we're at the mall.
Right.
I love the intermingling of characters,
Yeah.
and I love that it's when we get to the mall, we also meet the security team
Yes.
that's there. And arguably, CJ is like he's such a standout character for me, and as we talk about the movie, we'll say why. But at the moment, I loved seeing the security team mingle with these guys because again, you can see what fear does to people. Where
Right.
CJ's in this position now, where he's like he doesn't want to die, so he's very aggressive. He's very just in your face and like, hey, you're gonna do what we say. You're gonna do it exactly like this, and it's my way or the highway because he's scared. You know what I mean? So
Correct.
I loved our cast is getting bigger. You know what I mean? Our cast is getting bigger. Not everyone's gonna make it. So now you get to play that game of like, oh, is this person gonna make? Is this person gonna make it? But I love the introduction of the security team that we come across because they're all different. You have kind of like the rookie security guard who's very, he's just trying to be a good guy, and then you have CJ who's almost like terrified, but he's trying to like keep it together and be in control. And then you have the other security guard whose name is escape. Oh, Bart. You have Bart who is just very nonchalant. It's like he has no idea what's really happening out there. He's very naive to what's happening and the severity of it all. So again, I like the security team because within that group, we're getting three completely different characters and how they're interpreting what's happening around them.
Right.
So it was cool when we finally got to meet those guys.
Um, and CJ is just one of those characters. It's easy to hate him when you first meet him.
Yes.
It's really easy to hate him, just his delivery and And then when it it's so funny, whenever we see him again in other projects, it's so easy to hate him. He's just got an
Yeah.
unlikable face, but, we'll get to it as far as CJ goes, why
Mhm,
he's so important to the story. And, so we start finding out about the infection a little bit more. Um,
mhm.
we had a little thing where they kind of let us know, like, from watching from the TV, that you have to shoot them in the head, and then
Yes.
that'll put them down, because before then, somebody that was infected tried to get them, in the fountain, and
Mhm.
they were able to shoot him, but that didn't kill him. So they find out,
I
I have to shoot him in the head.
I gotta give a shout out to Tom Savini, who's playing the police officer who's saying you gotta shoot them in the head. For
There
those who
we go.
don't know,
Yeah,
Tom Savini is a major, major star when it comes to practical effects and makeup and then things of that nature. And
yeah.
he was also in the original Dawn of the Dead. He was the guy
There
that
we
worked
go.
on makeup and effects, and they put him in the movie as well. So again, Zach brought somebody back
That was
from
cool.
the OG, and I'm like, look at Tom Savini, man. It was awesome.
So we start finding about the infection, and such. We have a sick older lady, and,
Hmm.
she's a little heavy. They're carrying her in a wheelbarrow because she's so sick, she can't even take care of herself anymore, and we figure, it might be a problem later on. This lady dies within the first few minutes
Yeah,
of us
she
meeting
they
her.
they wheel her in. Now this is
Yeah.
and, to my knowledge, it's actually played by a stuntman because
Okay.
they had to put so much, like a bodysuit, and they were in
Right.
it for a long time, and they had to be able to run quick under this bodysuit, so they had a stunt actor do it, and I'll have to find out his name at some point, but as soon as you meet this character, she's wheeled in on this wheelbarrow, and you don't know how much time you got, but like you said, within minutes,
Minutes.
over, just flatline. And you and I know, and audiences are obviously like, is she gonna turn? Is she gonna turn? Is she gonna turn? We're just waiting for it to happen.
Right. And, oh, did she? She jumped right up, and she's
See,
running, and it's just a terrifying visual of her running at Anna, and, she gets shot, the character does. So,
she takes a, oh god, I don't know what you call it. It's one of those things that, like a fire poker, and she
okay. Oh, yeah,
just
she didn't shoot her, right.
stabs her
No,
through
she didn't
the
shoot her.
eye.
Right, she got her.
And she used it's like Brazilian jiu-jitsu, she used her own weight against her because she was charging at her full speed, and
Charging.
she just kind of stuck that thing out
Right,
right into the eye and fell over, and it was like, oh, that happened.
exactly.
That's the scariest thing I've ever seen. Someone that big running that fast. It was like a female Brock Lesnar just running at you at full speed, and I was like, no, no, I can't do that. I can't do that.
So then, Anna ends up being the person that starts trying to figure things out. Why are people getting
Hmm.
sick? How do they get sick? And then we find out, oh, it's the bites.
Yes.
It's the bites, because then she remembers, her SO got bit, and then, I think she saw a bite on the lady, and then we find out that, the man that came in with the daughter, he has a bite,
Yes.
and, uh,
Poor Frank. His name's Frank.
yeah, his name is
Nicole's dad,
Frank.
Frank.
Yeah, exactly.
Frank from Honey I Shrunk the Kids. That's Frank.
And we know this, but it hasn't been shared with the group. Um, Andre's significant other, Luda, the pregnant
Hmm.
woman, she had a bite. So now we're already getting to this. Okay, this is the new world now. We can't divulge things. We have to keep things. We don't know where things are going to happen. And, I do want to give a shout out to The Walking Dead. Obviously, for a lot of people, that was the first time they were exposed to this new world. What happens when an apocalypse happens?
Hmm.
And it's just, now it's about survival. Money doesn't matter anymore.
No.
Your job doesn't matter, your social status. Now we're all on the same level, because we can
Hmm.
all go at any points. And you'll see people like CJ. It's like, we're just fighting to survive right now. We can't trust you. I have to have a gun on you until I know I can trust you. And even then, I don't think I can trust you.
Yeah.
So now it's a situation of, well, I want to live, so I can't reveal if I have a bite or if somebody else has a bite. Are you
Hmm.
going to kill me? We don't know. And, we're faced with a moral question here. Am I going to shoot you in the head if you're infected, or am I going to wait until you die first? And then
Yeah.
I'm going to shoot you in the head. So, we get this scene where Frank is looking sickly and he has to say goodbye to his daughter. And, he, well, you mentioned the story to me about Anna charging in the room because she doesn't approve of the situation.
Yeah, I think it was her nurse instinct because for whatever reason, after everything that she's seen, I found it rather odd that it was she herself who understood somewhat of the diagnosis. She goes, "I think it's the bites, man. I think it's the bites. The bites are what killed her. The bite is what brought her back." And they're like, "Is anyone bitten?" And they say Frank. So obviously Michael, is like, well, then if he's bitten, we know what we have to do. And she's kind of like, well, you can't kill him. And he's like, I'm sorry, like he's already dead. And she looks at Kenneth for reassurance, and Kenneth is like, he's right, we have to. And I assumed, okay, Michael was gonna go talk to Frank and be like, hey, let's
Right.
like come with us, we're gonna go talk. But she just runs into the room, and I got kind
Right.
of angry with her. She runs through and she goes, hey, Frank. She's like, hey, Frank, Michael's coming to shoot you. And it's just like, whoa. And everybody's like, wait, why? And
Right.
then she gets aggressive and she goes, oh, well, if you're gonna shoot Frank, you might as well shoot, Tucker over there. And Tucker's like, but I'm not bit. And she goes, but you can't be sure. Shoot him, Michael, shoot him, Michael. And it's
Right.
like, I know what she was doing because she was upset, but realistically, Michael was right. And that's the route they eventually do
Right.
take.
And Michael's a great character too. Like he's such a moral compass for this movie, and
Yeah.
just the definition of like a good person. We'll get to some of
Yeah.
the lines that he delivers later on. Um, and then we start breaking things up. We get introduced to like a new. Well, we got introduced to the new group.
Mhm.
I had to write down the name of the actor. Was it Ty Burrell, Steve? You know the,
Yes.
the
Modern
smooth.
Family, Ty
Yeah, yeah,
Burrell.
yeah. Exactly. He would go on, but he's playing a very unlikable character in this movie. But um, his boat and everything ends up being the goal.
Hmm.
Eventually for these people to get out of here. So Frank, he sits and waits to die, and Rames is choking up as he watches them die. He waits for him, and then he still doesn't shoot him. He waits for him to come back. So it's almost like
Yeah.
I'm gonna wait until I know you're no longer there. Um, so
Frank gives a line and he whispers it, and it's a really powerful line, and I'm gonna butcher it, but the pretty much what he says is he's fighting the turn, and he says you just want to wait and count every second. It's some along those lines because he
yeah,
he understands that he's turning, and he just wants to hold on as long as he can. He wants to appreciate every single second that he has left. And Kenneth is allowing it. Kenneth is he's like, hey man,
yeah.
I'm not gonna do anything until you're completely gone.
Right. Yeah, he like and he knows he's like, the disease is taking this man from the planet, but at the end of the day, he has to shoot this man and he knows the daughter is in the same vicinity, in the other room.
Hmm.
She had already said goodbye. So, and Ving Rhames a little bit of acting there, nice little choke up
Yeah.
moment. So then we start getting a little wild here, everyone's having fun in the
Yeah.
mall, and they're conversing back and forth with Andy, who's by himself on the
Hmm.
corresponding building, and they're playing tic tac toe, they're playing um uh chess, you know,
Chess with random figurines, anything they could
yeah,
find.
and holding up the whiteboards, and then just randomly, they're shooting celebs that are outside that just happen to be outside.
It was so funny. That's such a funny scene in the movie because they're asking him to shoot lookalikes. It's like, "Oh, shoot Rosie O'Donnell." He's like, "Yeah, Rosie." You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Get Burt Reynolds and whatnot. It's pretty funny.
yeah, and
It's it's interesting that they were able to find humor in something so morbid. You know what I
right.
mean? Because everything's going to hell right now.
Right, and the first one was Jay Leno, and
Yep.
it's hilarious because it looked like Jay Leno, so,
Yep.
they went down the line there, so I thought that was funny just to mix it up, and then
Mhm.
we're not gonna get into it, but, like, everyone's doing their thing within the mall, just having fun,
Yep.
and, some of it is rated R, we're trying to keep things clean for the podcast, so,
Yeah. It's
um
also a good scene because and we'll come back it'll be explained later why it's important, but it's also a good scene to let the audience know that Andy is a very good shot and how important
Right,
that will be for them later.
exactly. So now we have after that, we then have a moment of everybody bonding, and people are talking about the worst jobs they've ever had, this, that, the other. And Michael, who's been like our moral compass for the whole movie, I think he said he worked at Best Buy or something. What did you do?
Yep,
Why
he
are you so
works at Best
special?
Buy selling TVs at Best Buy.
Right, and he's been such a leader, within this whole movie. And then, what do you think your worst job was? I was married, got the pink slip 3 times,
Yeah.
didn't work out. And then what was your best job being a dad?
being a dad, and that hurt a
Yeah,
lot because you keep in mind we find him and he's not with his kids. So
yeah,
you can think the unimaginable happened, and he's
right.
like, that I kind of think I was the best at that. And that it's a gut punch. You don't see it coming. They just hit you with a joke, marriage and oh, being a dad. And it's
Yeah,
just like, oh, Michael.
yeah. So a nice little soft moment. We're having all this craziness around us, and then this nice soft moment. So moving along here with the plot, we get to Luda. She's pregnant. She's full on sick, and we keep coming back and forth into the scene. With Andre and Luda. So she dies, and she comes back as the zombie,
Hmm.
and he delivers the baby. Andre's determined to do something good and take care of this baby because now it's like this is my only chance to redeem myself, and he's so delusional at this point. I'm going to keep my zombie family together.
Yes.
The mother of my zombie baby, which we haven't seen yet, and my zombie baby, because this is the only good I can do in this world again. This is my
Yep.
redemption story.
That's it.
And the one lady comes in, holding the gun, and he's just gone at this point.
Yeah.
Um, he doesn't care that Luda is done. He doesn't care that the baby's pretty much done at this point. What are you gonna do? You gonna kill my family? You gonna
Yeah.
take
He's
my
gone,
family?
man.
And he raises the gun and they both shoot each other and they're gone and then I would say this is probably the widest scene in the whole movie because Zach made it a point not to show the baby until after all the mess went down.
Yep.
And then, Anna pulls the blanket back and you see the zombie baby and it's just a heartbreaking, just
Yeah. It's
heartbreaking
so
scene that
sad.
the baby had no chance.
No.
And now we're in this new world where the new rules exist. We didn't show it. Didn't need to show it. Just we go to a scene and then you just hear the gunshot, you
Yep.
know? So, um, and I'm glad that he did it like that, that he waited to show the baby because it would have just made that whole scene just so much harder because Andre's trying to save the
Yeah.
baby and save, Luda and this, that, the other. It's like, dude, they're gone.
That's a heavy
They,
scene.
yeah, yeah,
It's a heavy scene because the old woman comes in and she's obviously in shock at what she's seeing. She's seeing one crazy display.
yeah,
He's got Luda tied up. She's already crossed and she's turned,
yep.
and she's holding a baby. And like you said, it was great that we didn't see because like even as an audience, you're like, is that baby alive?
We don't know yet.
Is you don't you have nothing. You got no sounds, nothing. So maybe you're like, oh, maybe the baby was born dead, and Zach went above that and was like, oh, it's the undead, and I was like, oh god,
Right. Yeah. Tough scene. Um, so we get to find out that I always forget his name. That Steve, um, he has a boat,
yes,
and apparently this boat is supposed to take them to safety somewhere. I don't know how, some island somewhere. They're thinking they need to get off the mainland. That's the main thing,
yeah,
because maybe the zombies haven't made it to the island or whatever. Let's address it by the way. Um, at first, I didn't like it that a lot of zombie movies didn't do this, but a big trope in zombie movies is that a lot of times they don't call them zombies because
no,
in that
no,
world, zombies don't exist. So it's the
they
first
don't
time there's
exist.
right, right. They call them walkers and The Walking Dead. I just
Yep,
finished, you know,
infected, sick,
right, right, right. We've both played Days Gone, Freakers,
freakers.
so
If you want a movie that calls them zombies, you watch something like Shaun of the Dead, and
right,
they even say it. He goes, "What? Why'd you say that word?" He goes, "What word? The said word. Don't say that word." He goes, "What zombie?" He goes, "Don't say that word." It's
right.
very funny.
Yeah, so that's a little tidbit there, like folks, like so if you ever see something they don't say zombie, it's because in that world zombies don't exist, or they're trying
They
to
don't
show
exist.
people, but they don't do that for other things though, which is funny because
Yep.
we've seen movies where oh you're a vampire, you're a
Yeah, you're
werewolf,
like vampires are
you're,
real. You know what I
but
mean?
for
Like,
zombie movies, just to make it
no.
scarier, they don't exist in that world. They've never seen them before in
Yep.
comics, video games, or movies. So it's a really cool. It's a trope that I've grown to like actually.
Hmm.
Um, so they're sitting around and, Kenneth is just like, there's something's worse than death. What are we going to do? Stay here to die? Because eventually they're going to take over the mall. And they have this plan to get through. There's like hundreds, thousands of them outside at this point. It started as
This
a
scene was
small thing,
awesome.
and then you see they're just overrun. Just because they're drawn to each other, and eventually they're just overrun. It's thousands of them outside. So the plan is to get to the boat so they can get to the island, start converting the bus, for destruction. And you'll get to talk about Andy here for a second. So
Mhm.
they have this dog, and they're like, they need to bring the goods to Andy. And I don't know if the plan was to get Andy to join them or not, but he needed food at this point, So
Yeah, yeah. If I remember correctly, the plan was they wanted to bring Andy, but it would be pointless to bring Andy if he didn't have any strength. They wanted him
right
as a shot. And they
there
were
we
like,
go.
"Look at him, dude. He's starving away." So
He's
they had
hungry,
mentioned like, "We need a shot like that. And if he can't hold himself up, we're just carrying dead weight. He's gonna slow us down." So they're like, "We got to give this guy some food, man."
right? Exactly. And I don't think they explained how they would get him onto the bus, but they said we need to
No.
get him. So
Yeah.
um, so then we find out the zombies aren't really stupid
Yeah.
because the dog finds this door, this tiny doggy door, and then one or two of the zombies find the door and then they go in.
Yep.
And up until then, they never thought about checking a door. They're just
Mm-mm.
like wandering around being zombies. And we hear everything transpire over the walkie-talkie. And they get to Andy,
Yep.
he doesn't make it, and um just a disturbing scene. They've been communicating back and forth on the whiteboards,
Oh
and
yeah.
he wipes blood on it already turned, and he holds the whiteboard up already turned, and
Yep.
it's kinda like letting us know, Andy's gone, unfortunately, and
Yeah.
they coulda used him because he was a good shot.
A very good shot,
Yep,
very good shot, and it was awesome that they did that because and we'll talk about this, later, but I love the idea that Andy, as he turned, his, like, muscle memory kicked in, and this was something he would do, was
right.
use the whiteboard, so he's just, wiping his hands on it, and it's just like, "Oh, there's blood everywhere." It's not Andy anymore, but it's like a muscle memory, and then he kinda
Right.
just goes back into it.
And they had mentioned that why were all of the zombies coming to the mall? They're like, maybe muscle memory, we don't know. And
Mhm,
then, they're attracted to each other, obviously. So that's how the horde started coming in. It
mhm.
started with a few that were just like, oh, I think I'm going to go to the mall today. And then they're just, over there. So then it starts getting wild again. We got a full on action scene now. They're shooting zombies, they're blowing them up, they're throwing napalms, not, Molotov cocktails, everything at them. Um, and they're getting through them by the hundreds at this point. CJ is stepping up, and
Dude,
we'll get to his scene in a second. It's a throwaway scene in the movie, but I thought it was just wild that it happened. So they had the chainsaw, and they're
yeah,
getting the zombies through the bus, through the grate. I'm calling it a bus, but whatever. You know, there's like a little slit to get the zombies, and somebody hits a bump.
yup,
So the guy holding the chainsaw accidentally hits one of the women. She's dead. And then the bus
yes,
flips and this chainsaw hits him. He's dead.
yep, gone.
And, you know, I went to the theater to see this movie, by the way, because
Same.
I had heard some things about it. I'm just like, I don't really like zombie movies, and then the reviews are just like, no, trust me, it's not like any zombie movie you've ever
Yep,
seen. So
I was in.
at this point, I'm just like, what are we doing here? At this point, so they're dead, and people are just like, they're not even taking a minute. They're just like, well, we got to keep going.
We
I'm
gotta
like, these
go.
two
We
people
got
just
we
got
gotta move.
chopped up, man. What is wrong with you
Yep.
people?
It's like, we gotta move.
You
Like,
know,
they're being
so
chased by zombies running as fast as they can. They're like, "Dude, we
right.
gotta go."
But in a way, it's another thing too, collateral damage is going to happen sometimes.
Mhm.
It happens in war, and in a way we're at war now because it's us
Yep.
versus them. And unfortunately, all it took was the bus hitting a bump, and I hit you with the chainsaw, and then I drop the chainsaw and it hits me too. So unfortunately, that was a really graphic scene, by the way. Like
It was
they showed it.
the practical effect of them creating a dummy and
Yeah.
allowing them to actually cut through with a chainsaw,
Right.
and you just get all that blood splatter. It's one of my favorite effects in the whole movie. It's really
Yeah.
good.
Well, they attached it to her because you could still see
Mhm.
her reacting and everything. I'm like, wow, it's a great practical effect. Earlier in the movie, um, and I notice this is an ongoing theme with Zach, he will have a callback to something that might have happened earlier in his movies. And early in
Yes.
the movie, when they find out that you know where I'm going, where they find out if you get shot in the head, if you get infected, it's shot in the head's the only way to get rid of it. And Steve,
Mhm.
pretty much one of the most unlikable characters in the whole movie, you know, she tells him, "Well, tell you what, Anna, I know you hate me. If I get infected, you could shoot me in the head." And she's just like, "Oh, don't worry, I will."
Yeah, you can
And
count on it. You
yeah, yeah, exactly. And at this point, he's already offered his boat and this, that, the other. So, you know, everything's, under the bridge at this point. But unfortunately, after the bus turn, he does get infected. And, they go to do it. And Anna's just like, no, I got this. I got this. And then, she shoots him. And apparently there was a reason for it because she had to get the boat keys off of him, too.
Yes. Yep.
So it wasn't just like she was getting him back for being a jerk. So,
No, 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 no. She needed them keys. She was smart.
yeah. Yeah, so but it was a really cool callback. I
It
like that Zach
was.
does that.
There's another one with CJ, and I'll bring it up when we get to it.
Sure. Well, you can go for it right now because uh,
Okay.
yeah, because yeah,
So in there's a scene when when they first come, when they first meet CJ and the security team, and they're on the roof, and CJ is kind of arguing with them, and he points the gun at her, and she's like, "Get that gun out of my face," and they're going back and forth,
right,
and he goes, "I don't want to die." So you see he's afraid, and she's like, "What are you gonna do?" And like, "What, are you gonna shoot all of us?" And he goes, "I will shoot and kill every one of you
right.
if it meant it would keep me alive." And it's a they come back to this in the final act of the movie, and we'll come back to that line, but that is the line. He goes, I will kill each and every one of you if it means it will keep me alive." And then
Exactly.
we'll touch
And
on it in the final act.
yeah, it's okay. Well, we're here actually. So
Good,
um
good.
yeah, continue on. Yeah, please. So what
Good.
does CJ end up
So
doing?
obviously now at this
Yeah,
point they're all in one bus and they're making it to the boat, and they get to the boat and the zombies are right on them, man. Like they're right there.
right,
And everyone's getting out of the bus, and CJ's left on the bus, and not by choice. He could have absolutely run off of the bus.
right,
But he goes, they're not, like, he doesn't say it, he doesn't need to, but it's kind of like they're not going to make it. So he stays on the bus, and Ken is like, CJ, brother, come on. And CJ does that thing. He goes, keep going, man, I'll catch up. And
right.
you're like, he's not going to catch
No,
up.
he's not.
And he stays behind, and he just starts unloading his clips completely on any zombie he can, and he's doing everything else. And then he lures enough, he takes a flare, he lights it. He's got some tanks in there with him. He opens fire as he's completely surrounded by the horde, and he takes out quite a bit. And he also created a barrier.
Right,
So now the zombies can't get to the deck. So for CJ to say at the beginning of the movie, I will shoot and kill each and every one of you if it meant it would keep me alive, has now completely flipped and has given his life to save those exact people that he was like, I have no problem killing you. And it's why CJ's probably my favorite character in the movie, because when we first meet him again, he's afraid, he's terrified, he's scared.
right,
You know what I mean? And that's why he's acting that way. I mean, perfect example. Look how Steve acts versus CJ. Steve is just a jerk, man. He's just a jerk. There's no rhyme or
right.
reason to him. He's just a jerk.
He is.
CJ comes off like a jerk, but he's scared. But CJ, every point of the movie, when he needed to step up to save people, he did it. Arguably one of my favorite characters in the movie.
Yeah, it's great. And then in a way, like, everyone's either injured or not really that good of a shot, and he knows that he's their best chance, and it's just like, well, what am I gonna do? Run with everybody, and then the horde takes us over anyway,
Mm-hmm.
or I take out as many of them as I can, and at least I save these people's lives, you
Yep.
know? It's because I mean, in a way, he was thinking about it. If I run with everybody, they might get to us anyway, and then we all die,
Yeah, there was
So
they there was nothing stopping those zombies, and he
right,
literally created a
it's just like, "You know
barrier.
what? It's gonna be me, I'm gonna go
Yep.
down as a hero," and it was really cool. Great redemption.
Great
And,
redemption, man.
so, they make it to the boat, and then, unfortunately, Michael reveals he has a bite.
Yep.
And at this point, Anna and Michael had, they had, like, a bit of a romance at this point.
Mhm.
And, we don't know what Michael's life was beforehand. We know Anna had a significant other, but that person got infected, died and got infected, and they don't know anything about Michael. But it's almost just like, well, this is the new world now. Maybe we found each other in this new world, and
Mhm.
it's like, nope. Michael, the one quote unquote good person, not going to happen. So
Nope.
He doesn't wait to turn or anything. He ends up taking his own life, just like, um, I think I'm just to hang back for a little bit, and everyone's just like, oh, they got him.
Yep.
So
Yep.
they make it to the boat. Eventually, they make it to the island, and through the camcorder, you see the swarm, and then you have no idea what happens to the next. It just ends just
Nope.
like that.
That's it.
Yeah, and you had mentioned to me something about the camcorder from Steve that you thought was
Oh
really
yeah.
cool.
I love that aspect, right? Because there's a couple ways you can interpret this. One, for us, the audience, to be watching that footage, it would be considered found footage.
Right,
So you're like, well, who found that footage? Did they survive? Did someone else survive? But I love the camcorder aspect because for throughout the whole movie, we're watching as outsiders, but that camcorder kind of puts us in there with our audience, so we can see what they're seeing in the exact same light. And I thought it was really really cool to have the camcorder experience to kind of be like, hey, you're now a part of this group walking onto this island, and little do you know that free world that you're looking for doesn't exist. These things
right.
are everywhere, and it's a very dark ending. And you can be one of those people that goes, maybe they got on the boat and fled. But if you're paying attention during those recordings, their resources are running dry, the boat is malfunctioning. It's like this is probably their last stand. This was probably it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So at this point, the movie's over, and
Yep.
we're just left with that. Um, what was your reaction when you were done seeing this movie? For
Dude,
me, it was just like, what did I just see? I'd never
I
seen anything like this before. It was 2004.
Yes. It was 2004, and I remember, again, I love zombie movies. I love zombie movies. They were my favorite subgenre in horror when it came to, like, creatures like werewolves and vampires. It was always zombies. There was something about the idea of what they stood for. Romero would tell you some things about, like, his Dawn of the Dead being at a mall was about, like, a take on commercialism and how we're just drawn to those places and we just spend money mindlessly and whatnot. And I always appreciated, like, the zombie lore and whatnot. So when I saw this movie, I was like, "Oh, cool, a zombie movie, right? That's it,
Right.
a zombie movie." I'm looking forward to a remake of Dawn of the Dead. I was a little hesitant even at that age because I love George Romero's Dawn of the Dead, and I watched this in the theater. I was by myself,
Oh, okay.
and throughout watching it, I was like, this feels like a zombie movie on steroids. I've never seen anything like it. Again, because I did see 28 Days Later, but I didn't see them as zombies. I saw them as something like, okay, yeah, it's a rage virus. But this, I was like, there's zombies and they're running. And then my mind started to work and go, well, why can't a zombie run if we're talking about the first 24 to 48 hours of infection? Like, why can't they run? Like,
Right.
okay, let's go for it. You know what I mean? And again, I appreciated the fact that there was no real big build up. There was maybe like 4 minutes of like little context here and there, like little teases, but at the 5 minute mark, we're all in. So I remember walking away, and I think this was this Zack Snyder's feature film debut? Because he had done
Y-
some commercials and things. This was his
Yeah.
feature film debut.
Commercials and music videos. Yeah.
Yes. So I remember watching this and going, "Who did this?" I'm like, "Oh, Zack Snyder." I'm like, "Whoever that
Snyder.
guy is, give him more." And
Right.
I'm a fan of him, to this day. But
To
Dawn of
this
the Dead,
day.
man, it just it rocked me, man. It rocked me.
Yeah. Good stuff. And for me, it was just like, well, I can't say I don't like zombie movies anymore.
Yeah. It was like, "Oh
Just
no."
wasn't really my thing. So now it's like whenever a zombie movie comes out, um, we'll get to that in a second here.
Mhm.
So favorite, favorite roles, obviously you have Michael Kelly as CJ.
It's
That's your
CJ.
guy.
Absolutely love CJ.
Um, I enjoy Jake Weber as Michael.
Mhm.
Ving Rhames as Kenneth. Obviously, he had a standout role. Mekhi Phifer as Andre. We have Ty Burrell as Steve, who Modern Family. Um,
Mhm.
for me, I like Sarah Polly as Anna,
Mhm.
and she actually went on to become a director eventually. But I just like Anna's evolution as a character. She just this innocent wants to do good, and then eventually it's like we have to do whatever we have to do to survive. So
Yep.
I'm surprised she didn't go on to do a lot more after this. I think
Yeah.
what I tell
Yeah.
you, she was in Splice, a weird movie.
Splice. Weird movie, man.
Yeah, very
Adrian
odd.
Brody, her, very weird
Yeah,
movie.
Yeah, very odd. So, um, now we get to talk about perhaps maybe a lasting impact,
Yeah.
um, of this movie. Like we go back and forth. You know, sometimes we see a zombie movie where they're slow, but sometimes we
Mhm.
see them when they're fast now. And now it's we can't help but go back to think that like, oh well, Dawn of the Dead was the first time we saw that.
Yeah, and it's a testament to what Zach does, and Zach has done this in numerous projects where he's kind of like, well, whatever the typical thing is that's associated with these characters, I'm going to evolve it a little bit. And like you said, now we get running zombies. It's up to whoever is behind it. But Zach was the first one that was kind of like, well, zombies again, not the rage virus, but actual zombies, the living dead. I'm gonna make them run. And I remember I had friends that were big zombie fans who did not agree with that decision. That they were
Right,
like, "No, zombies aren't supposed to run. They're supposed to walk." And I would ask them, "Why? Zombies don't exist. They can do whatever you need them to be in film and cinema and any type of art. They're whatever." And then they would say, "Well, George A. Romero, George Romero, he created the zombies and they only walk." And to my understanding, George is not a fan of running zombies either, which is
well, that's fair.
that's fair. Like that's it. But again, it's the idea that if someone's gonna do something, especially a remake, in my opinion, of one of the best zombie movies of all time, which is the 1978 Dawn of the Dead, if you're gonna remake it, why not change it up a little bit? He kept the mall setting, he kept the characters, but what would you do to differentiate your version from the original? And he said, I'm gonna have full on running zombies. One of my favorite zombies is when they go in the parking garage and the zombie has no legs. And if you remember, he's crawling through the piping, like he's using just his hands and he's
Right,
climbing and he falls on a guy. You would never suspect a zombie to be able to have that kind of coordination to do something like that. But Zach is like, no, my zombies are on steroids. They can do whatever they need to do to get to you. And it made them scarier. You know what I
right.
mean? It made them scarier. Like all of a sudden, I'm watching this and I'm like, you know what? Again, I would have a really difficult time.
I think about it wasn't until 2013 when World War Z came out.
Mhm.
And, you know, we've seen the running zombies, but then now they're running, but they're like they're coming at you in hordes, just
Yes.
hundreds upon hundreds to the point where they're piling on top of each other to get over walls and stuff like that. So, um, I think about that. I find it hard to believe, if not for this movie, Dawn of the Dead, we don't get the Dead Rising video game where
Oh
it's
yeah, I could.
where
Yeah.
it's set in the mall, you know,
Mhm.
and I remember even this is another video game, the Dead Island trailer, and
Yes.
it's we open with the I think there was like a little kid, you know,
Oh,
and
it's heartbreaking trailer, man. It's a
right, right,
heartbreaking trailer.
you know, it was just kind of like shades of that little girl from the Dawn of the Dead movie, you know, but uh, we just see just this movie. While it was influenced by some things, it ended up influencing other projects. You
Yeah.
know, the
Yeah. I
Zack Snyder's The Blueprint.
Zack Snyder is the blueprint, hashtag the blueprint. Because
Yeah,
and, like, when you bring up the little girl is perfect too, right? Because the very first zombie attack we see is a little girl, and naturally, like our main character, significant other in the film, when he sees her, his he's not looking at her as a threat. His guard is let down. And I feel like we've kind of associated that with zombie movies. Again, we watch zombie movies and we go, "Oh, we know zombies. We're fine." You know what I mean? And Zach said no. And the same way those characters are, they're kind of like, "Oh, that's oh, okay, like not a big deal." But then
right.
little do you know, she's ripping your jugular out. And the audience is also like, "Oh my god, wait a minute. This is not what we were expecting. She's quick, she's agile." I love that when she gets pushed down, she like leaps up to her feet. And
Yeah.
from that moment, I was like, we are in serious trouble. And I love that. I love that feeling of like, yeah, this isn't, we're not we're not in Kansas anymore, man.
Yeah, and, even a callback. I wanna say the first episode of The Walking Dead, where the first time we see a little girl
The little
and
girl.
she's infected. It might have been the first episode,
Yeah, I'm
and
pretty
it's
sure
just
it's
kinda
first
like
episode.
we were used that trope that, like, it's a child, but that's not a human child anymore, that's a zombie
Mm-mm.
child, you know,
Yep.
and it's just time and time again, it doesn't get old, you know, you see children, but they've been robbed of their future because they're now infected.
Yeah, yeah, and we over the years, we've starting to see more movies and television shows take advantage of that, where maybe
Right,
back in the day, you wouldn't see it too often. Now in the original, Night of the Living Dead, Romero was like, "No, I'm gonna turn a child into a zombie." Now, she was a little bit older, but it was still a child, and back then, it was rare, and I feel like there was a time in between where we didn't see it too often, and then Zack Snyder was like, "Oh, no, no, I'm gonna do it," and then Walking Dead, and most recently, The Last of Us television show, we saw infected children. So,
right.
like, it's over years, it's become more prevalent, but there was a time where it wasn't, and when I can think back to movies that scarred me to a degree because of children, Dawn of the Dead is one of those first films that
It's
does
the
that for
first
me.
right, it was the first time. So, you have any, other thoughts on Dawn of the Dead, Ricardo? I learned something today. I didn't know this was your favorite horror genre from,
When it
um
comes to creatures, like, when it
yeah,
comes to creatures, like, obviously slasher, when it comes to, like, vampires, werewolves, and everything else, zombies are my favorite,
right,
because zombie movies also explore the reality of that zombies are not only your enemy, it's the people around you as well that you have to worry about, because a zombie is mindless, and a zombie only wants one thing, and it's to consume. That's it. But
right,
the people around you can want many different things that are very, very, very scary. And I always like that aspect that zombie movies explore that, and that even in an apocalyptic world where zombies are essentially out to get you, you still have really terrible people that will take advantage of that bad
right.
situation to manipulate you. And I love that about zombie movies. So for me, again, that's why zombies are my favorite. I love Romero's films, but Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, when I think about my top 5 zombie films, it's absolutely in there. I remember
Yeah,
watching it as a kid in a theater by myself. I watched it numerous times. I love the bonus features on the DVD. I love the commentary track. There's one of my I'll bring it up just because it's funny. There's a scene in the movie I know you remember where the zombies are coming up the stairs at the very end during the big climax, and they all stop. They stop on the stairs and they wait for a second. And then they're like, okay, now we go. And I remember listening to the commentary, and Zach said people asked him, zombies wouldn't stop. Why do you have them stop? And he goes, "Yeah, no, they would never stop. It just looked cool." And I don't know why I thought that was so funny that even as a director, he was like, "Oh, let's just do it for fun. It looks cool." Like, and I know it doesn't make sense, all right, but let's just do it. And like in the scene, I remember in the theater, again, it's such a small thing, but it added an evolutionary thing to the zombies because at that moment I was like, "Wait, can they think?"
right,
Because you have CJ and you have Kenneth up there like locked and loaded, and they come up and they just wait. And they're waiting and they're waiting and they're just like, all right, now we go. And it was just like, oh, I don't know. It was just cool. But I love this movie. It's one of my favorite zombie movies. It's one of my favorite Zack Snyder movies. Um, I, I'm happy that he came back to do more zombie movies.
he
So
did, he did.
I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, and, we'll get there eventually, Army of the Dead,
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
they call that the spiritual sequel to
Yeah.
Dawn of the Dead, maybe not a
Yep.
direct one. Um, I was gonna ask you, do you have a favorite zombie movie by any chance?
My favorite zombie movie. It used to be, oh man, it used to be Shaun of the um it was Shaun of the Dead for a few years because
Okay,
Edgar Wright, and I love Edgar Wright, and I love that that movie mixed a comedic flair, but the whole final act of that movie is just dead serious
right,
zombie like chaos. But as of late, when people ask me, and obviously it'll change, you and I both know movie buffs, list will change. As of right now, it's Train to Busan. Train to Busan
that's a good one.
really, it just there's a
Good pick.
because like there's always there's great social commentary in it, which we know that a lot of films overseas like to explore. There's a great social commentary on it, and again, we have the running zombies.
Yeah,
You got a full running zombie that might not have been made, and if I remember correctly, I don't want to misspeak. I'll have to look this up at some point, but I think the director had brought up the 2004 Dawn of the Dead film. So
okay,
I'll have to look into that. I need to make sure I'm right before. So as you're talking, I'll look it up to make sure I'm not speaking out of turn. But Train to Busan probably at this moment is my favorite. And Dawn of the Dead is like top 3. I love it.
okay. I feel like I keep coming back to Dawn of the Dead because it was the
Mhm.
first time I was interested in a zombie movie. Like when I'd watch
Okay.
them, they were just kind of like they were hit or miss for me, horror. I appreciate horror, but it's not one of my favorite genres. But
Okay.
just with the action in this movie, and since then there were zombie movies. You named most of them. Shaun of the Dead. I think about. I do think
Love
about World
Shaun of
War
the Dead.
Z because the concept of the hordes in World War Z was scary. Um, Train to Busan was incredible. Such a dramatic experience. And I'll name another one here. Warm Bodies.
Warm Bodies is a
Yeah, a
fun rom-com with zombies in
rom-com.
it.
Rom-com, so, but I just always come back to just, Dawn of the Dead, you know? Yeah, what was
I
it?
found it. I found it. So, the director of Train to Busan, it says, he goes, "It was Snyder's movie," and this is a quote, "not the 1978 original that filmmaker Yan Sang-ho recalled as his first encounter with the undead. That was when I started my interest in zombies, was Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead from 2004."
I
So
like that.
again, the fact that Dawn of the Dead 2004 is the first time that the director of quite possibly my favorite zombie movie was like, it was Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, and I love that.
Yeah, that's great, and, man, just and in a way, like, I feel like the zombie genre was kinda stale for a little bit,
Mhm. Yeah.
we it was an interesting time, the mid-2000s, and, Zach kind of injected some life into it, and, we get them every now and then, but that's really cool, that he was able to do that. So, all right, well, that was our discussion on Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead.
Love this movie. I was so happy when you were like, "We're doing Zach's filmography," and I was like, "The first thing
Yeah,
we're watching is Dawn of the Dead." I was stoked, dude.
yeah,
I've watched this movie so many times.
right, and, see, I'm not familiar with the original too much. It wasn't a frame for frame remake, it was just kinda, like,
No.
based on Romero's Dawn of the
The
Dead.
the mall is basically it.
Okay,
That's basically their only connection. They are
right,
completely different films. In the 1978, you're dealing with officers that are, having to put people down in the city, and then they find refuge in the mall. And then you
right.
have these biker gangs show up, and they're kind of making fun of the zombies and bullying them and beating them up. And there's a lot more social commentary, I think, in the Romero version. But yeah, they're completely different.
Yeah, good stuff, good stuff. Alrighty. Well, folks, I did want to thank you for tuning in, for listening, and such. If you enjoyed our discussion, or if you enjoy what we're doing here with the Panel Bros, please give us a like, share, and subscribe on YouTube at the Panel Bros. And please continue letting your friends know about us. We appreciate that as well. For Ricardo Segura, this is Anderson Marchak saying thank you for coming to the panel.